we finished the previous section showing a firm that was earning a loss. Now, firms earning a loss need to decide whether to produce or to shut down in the short run. So suppose there's a firm in a perfectly competitive market that's making a loss, like in our final example. It would like the price of the goods to be higher, but it's a price taker, so there's no way for them to raise the price and to still have people buy their product. This leaves that firm with two options. The first is to continue to produce and earn a loss, or they could stop production by shutting down temporarily. If the firm shuts down, it will still need to pay its fixed cost. So it still has to pay for the, let's say the factory, it still has to pay for the equipment, all these sorts of things. The firm needs to decide whether it can incur only its fixed costs, or if it should produce and incur some of the variable costs as well, but also obtain some revenue to offset them. Fixed costs should be ignored in this case because they're sunk costs. They're costs that have already been paid, and no matter what the firm does, it can't be recovered. Even if they literally have not been paid yet, the firm is still obligated to pay them. So in that case, no matter what, they're still going to have to pay. The firm's shutdown decision is based on its variable cost. So the firm should produce nothing only if the total revenue is less than the variable cost. So if the price times the quantity is less than the variable cost. So if we divide both sides of this by Q, we obtain price being less than the average variable cost. And this is the relationship we're going to use. So if the price is less than the average variable cost, then the firm should produce 0 units of output. If the price that they're receiving for the goods they're selling is less than the variable cost, then they're going to lose even more money by producing. If the price is greater than the average variable cost, they'll make money above their variable cost. So they'll be able to pay off some of their fixed cost. In that case, the firm should produce some goods. So if the price is greater than or equal to the average variable cost, then firms should use the marginal cost equals marginal revenue rule to guide their production. So you produce the quantity where the marginal cost equals the marginal revenue. So for a perfectly competitive firm, this means where the marginal cost equals the price, because remember, the price is equal to the marginal revenue for a perfectly competitive firm. So the marginal cost curve gives us the relationship between the price and the quantity supplied. This is the firm supply curve. Remember, the firm will produce at the level of output at which marginal revenue equals marginal cost. Because price equals the marginal revenue for a firm in a perfectly competitive market, the firm is going to produce where the price equals the marginal cost. So the firm supplies output according to its marginal cost curve. The marginal cost curve is going to be the supply curve for the individual firm. This is important to remember. The marginal cost curve is a firm's supply curve in the short run, only above the shutdown point. So where the marginal cost curve and the average variable cost curve cross, at that point, that's the shutdown point. Anywhere below there, the firm will not produce anything. So if the price is below that, we'll have a vertical line at the 0 quantity being sold or being produced. So that's why we have a vertical line from 0 to the price minimum. At that point, we have a horizontal supply curve, and then we have an increasing supply curve above the shutdown point. So if the price is too low, if it's below the minimum point on the average variable cost curve, the firm will produce nothing at all. The market supply curve is in a perfectly competitive market is determined by adding up all the individual firms' supply curves. So they take the prices given. They're not able to affect the price. So given the price that they're able to receive, they choose their level of output to maximize their profit. So on the left, we have one individual wheat farmer and their supply curve, which is their marginal cost curve. On the right, we have the sum of all of those farmers, and that's going to be the market supply curve. Now, if everyone can do it, you can't make money at it, is the title of this next section. It's about the entry and exit of firms in the long run in a perfectly competitive market. Because remember, one of the assumptions of a perfectly competitive market is that there are no barriers to entry and exit. So if a firm begins making money in a perfectly competitive market, if all the firms are profiting, or many of them are profiting, new firms can enter the market and can compete that profit down. And we're going to explore in this section how that happens. So the example we're going to go through is Sasha Gillette, who starts a small cage-free egg farm. So now Sasha manages the farm herself, so she gives up a $30,000 salary that she could have earned managing somebody else's farm. She also invests $100,000 of her own money into the farm, foregoing the $10,000 a year in investment income that she could have received from, the interest and from whatever asset the value is appreciating. Both the salary and the investment income are part of the implicit costs of running the farm. These are the opportunity costs that Sasha would not have occurred if the farm did not exist. The table on the right shows all of Sasha's costs, both the explicit costs and the implicit cost. So now the sum of her costs are $125,000. Sasha produces 50,000 dozen eggs, and she's going to sell these at $3 per dozen. So Sasha's total revenue is $150,000. So her economic profit, which is her revenues minus all of her costs. Now these are both implicit cost and explicit cost. Her economic profit is going to be $25,000. Now if Sasha's costs were higher than her revenues, she would be making an economic loss. Now economic profit is different from accounting profit. Accounting profit only considers the explicit costs and the revenue gained. Economic profit considers the explicit cost and the implicit costs along with the revenue. So it's considering the opportunity cost. And that's going to be important when we talk about whether firms decide to enter or to exit a given industry. Now, unfortunately for Sasha in this case, the economic profits in the egg farming business are not going to last. Now, why is this? Additional farms are going to enter the market because they're attracted by the profit that they see. So some farms may switch from other products to cage-free eggs, or new people will open up new farms, completely new competitors. However it happens, and it's usually some combination of the two, the total number of firms in the market are going to increase. This is going to increase supply, which in turn lowers the price that Sasha can receive for her. Let's explore graphically what's going to happen when Sasha Gillette's earning a profit in a perfectly competitive market. So in the figure on the slide, on the left is the market for eggs, and on the right is Sasha Gillette's own cost curves and demand for eggs. So now the market price is going to be $3, determined by the market supply and demand, that equilibrium point. Now that $3 price, because Sasha Gillette is a price taker, is going to be the demand curve. It's going to be horizontal at $3. So Sasha is going to produce, again, where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. So in this case, it's going to be 50,000 units of eggs. The profit is going to be determined by the difference between the price and the average total cost, where marginal costs and marginal revenue intersect. So at that equilibrium quantity, the difference between the price and the average total cost is the per unit quantity, or per unit profit, and then multiply that by the quantity to get the overall profit. So you can see that the economic profit for Sasha Gillette is going to be the green area of that rectangle on the picture on the right. Now, seeing that profit, other firms recognize that. And it's going to attract new firms into the market, and it's going to increase the supply. Now, what's the effect of the increase in supply? For that, we have to turn back to the market supply and demand curves. And we see that's going to shift the supply curve to the right, or it's going to increase the supply. So there's going to be a greater quantity of eggs being provided, and the price is going to fall. In this case, it falls from $3 to $2. Now, Sasha has no choice, because she's a price taker, than to accept the market price is determined by equilibrium. So her demand curve is going to fall, and her marginal revenue curve is going to fall from $3 to $2. Now her production is going to decrease down, in this case, to 40,000 eggs. Again, she's going to produce where the marginal revenue curve crosses the marginal cost curve. Now in this case, it's going to go all the way down until the marginal cost curve and the marginal revenue curve intersect with the average total cost curve. So this is going to reduce the economic profit all the way down to zero. At that point, because Sasha and the other farmers selling eggs, because there is zero economic profit, that's not going to encourage any more farmers to begin selling eggs. So at that point, there's no more incentive to draw more people in, to increase supply. So the profit isn't going to fall anywhere below that. So she's going to end up breaking even. Now let's explore what happens when there's an economic loss for firms in a perfectly competitive market. So at the end of last example, the price of eggs was $2 per dozen, and egg farmers were breaking even. And we see this on the right, that the marginal cost and the average total cost curve cross the demand curve all at the same point. So there's zero economic profit. But let's say consumer tastes change, that they end up demanding less eggs for some reason. That shifts the demand curve to the left. So it's going to decrease the quantity demanded and the price. When the price falls to $1.75 in the market, the individual producers, because they're price takers, are forced to charge $1.75. So in this case, the demand curve falls from $2 to $1.75, and Sasha Gillette, trying to maximize her profit or to minimize her losses in this case, is going to produce where the marginal revenue equals the marginal cost, but she's going to be producing at a loss. Discouraged by these losses, some farmers are going to exit the market because they're losing money. It's not worth it for them. They can earn more money doing other things, using their resources in different ways. What that's going to do is cause the market supply to decrease. When the market supply decreases, the quantity demanded decreases, but the price increases. So what's going to happen in this market is the supply curve will decrease. It will shift to the left all the way up until the point where the equilibrium price is $2. Because when the equilibrium price is at $2, for the individual farmers, that's when the marginal cost and marginal revenue curves cross at the minimum point on the average total cost. So again, there's zero economic profit. At this point, there's no more encouragement for firms, or in this case farmers, to leave the egg producing market. These last few slides described how long-run competitive equilibrium is achieved in a perfectly competitive market. If firms are making an economic profit, additional firms are going to enter the market, driving down the price to the break-even level. Because they see an opportunity to earn a profit, they'll take advantage of that. If firms are making an economic loss, they're losing more money than they could be making elsewhere. Existing firms will exit the market, and that's going to drive the price back up to the break-even level. Since the long-run average cost curve shows the lowest cost at which a firm is able to produce a given quantity of output in the long run, we expect price to be driven down to the minimum point on the typical firm's long-run average cost curve. So the long-run competitive equilibrium is a situation in which entry and exit of firms has resulted in the typical firm breaking even. Therefore, in the long run, the market will supply any demand by consumers at a price equal to the minimum point on the typical firm's average cost curve. So the long-run supply curve is going to be horizontal at this price. In a perfectly competitive market, the long-run price is completely determined by the forces of supply. The number of suppliers adjusts to meet demand at the lowest possible price. So the long-run supply curve is a curve that shows the relationship in the long run between the market price and the quantity supplied. This slide graphically shows what we talked about on the previous slide, how an increase or decrease in demand is met by a corresponding increase or decrease in supply, but price is always returning to the long-run break-even level. Now let's look at an example. The title of this slide is Easy Entry Makes the Long Run Pretty Short. So when firms earn economic profits in a market, other firms have a strong economic incentive to enter that market. Now this is exactly what happened with iPhone apps. So because these were extremely profitable in a very short amount of time, more than 25,000 apps were available in the iTunes store within that first year. The cost of entering this market, the market for apps, was extremely small. So if you had some programming skills and some free time, you could write an app and have it posted in the store. So as a result of all this competition and the ease of entry, the ability to get rich quick with a killer app, in quotes, they faded rather quickly. Early on, app makers could earn a very large economic profit, but over time, and in this case very quickly, that was competed down because of the increase in supply. And this is what we see happening in perfectly competitive markets. Because there is very low cost of entry, if there's a profit being earned, if a firm is doing exceedingly well, other firms are going to notice that, and they're going to easily enter that industry and begin competing against them, driving down the price. Now, there are some shortcomings of perfect competition to this model that I want to discuss before the end of the chapter. Perfect competition is an abstraction from reality. So models are meant to deepen our understanding of different processes or different things that are going on in our economy. But they simplify the real world. They make assumptions and they ignore some things in order to make it, possible to work with. And so we have sort of intuitive results. So perfect competition provides some insight, but it's important to remember that it's not an exact replication of the real world. Firstly, firms try to differentiate their products all the time. So the model of perfect competition ignores real competition and differentiation. So firms try to differentiate their goods based on the quality of those goods. They use advertising. They try to get more consumers. Sometimes they tie the production of their good to other goods. So a good example of that is sheets. Gasoline is a perfectly competitive market. However, sheets can tie their gasoline to their grade made to order food selection. They can have a rewards program for loyal customers, different things to try to compete on, slightly different margins than just competing on the gasoline itself. Firms also develop brand name capital by being known as very good firms to purchase from, by having high quality goods, having good customer service. If there's no competition, if there's no trying to differentiate goods, trying to provide better goods, trying to do things differently, then there's really no competition going on. Competition in a perfectly competitive market is just more firms entering, providing the same product. So in the model we discussed in the previous few slides, competition ends at equilibrium, and at that point, the market's set again and rarely moves. But that's not real. Remember, competition is a constant process of entrepreneurial successes and failures. Consumers' tastes are constantly changing, and firms will fail or succeed in meeting those needs. So they must adapt to new consumer demands, new consumer taste, and new different ways to produce the goods. Perfect competition is a very useful model, but it does not give us a good proxy for most of the industries we're seeing in the real world. Oftentimes, it's not the students, but it's the economists, the professional economists, that forget this. And they begin trying to design policy as if every industry is perfectly competitive, and as if the goal is to make every industry perfectly competitive. That shouldn't be the goal. Remember, it's competition. It's entrepreneurs creating new products and bringing them to market, trying and failing or trying and succeeding. That's what true competition is, and that's what ends up making people better off in the long run.